The Denver Broncos and Cincinnati Bengals are both looking to avoid a little bit of a tailspin going into the month of October. They'll cap off week 4 here on Monday Night Football, and we're talking about it on today's crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Broncos, Locked On Bengals.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Broncos and Bengals played one of the best and one of the NFL's most highly rated games in the 2024 season back around Christmas time. But here in 2025, week 4, there's a vastly different storyline going on with these two teams. Obviously, the Denver Broncos lost 2 straight, and the Cincinnati Bengals have lost their star quarterback. So what do you have to look forward to in this game, Broncos country and Bengals fans? Well, we're going to break it all down for you on today's crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Broncos and Locked On Bengals. Welcome to all of you listening, however you're choosing to do so, whether your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. We appreciate you so much, all you everydayers out there that make our shows exactly what they are. My name is Sayre Bedinger. I'm the co-host of Locked On Broncos. He's James Rapien, host of Locked On Bengals. And Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. James, I'm excited for this matchup, and I'm more excited too because we get a chance to see these two teams going on early in the season. Last year, there were some playoff stakes. And ultimately, I think that's what we're focused on in this game is kind of just the feeling of, are the playoffs still within grasp for these two teams? Let's break down the biggest storylines in this game, James, because obviously the Cincinnati Bengals, you guys have already talked about it. I'm sure you're ready to move on from talking about it, but it is obviously a big underlying theme every single week here. Going into Denver this week, the backup quarterback, Jake Browning, what's the biggest storyline for the Bengals here in week 4?
Well, can they be a competent football team? Because they weren't last week against the Vikings. You lose 48-10, and it was ugly. 5 turnovers, 2 other fumbles that weren't turnovers, 1 pick six, a fumble recovery for a touchdown. I mean, it was as bad of a performance as you could get. And now you're going up against a Broncos team that needs to win. Let's be honest here. Both of these teams feel like they need to win. Because if the Bengals fall to 2-2, with Detroit looming, with what we saw from Detroit on Monday night, that's a really tough spot to be in, especially without Joe Burrow. Meanwhile, the Denver Broncos, I don't think anyone had them 1-3 in their first 4. So this is a huge game for both teams. And the Bengals have to find a way to flush the Vikings game, but then have their best game of the season, including the first 2 wins of the year. They have not played great at any point this year to this point. And I think if they're going to Denver, get a win in Denver, they're going to have to play great. They're going to have to play a complete game, and that's much, much easier said than done, especially for a team that doesn't have Joe Burrow. So the biggest storyline, can they be a functional team and somehow, some way play their best game of the season? If they do those things, then I do think they have a chance against Denver. But as we'll break down here, there's a lot of things that need to change if that's going to happen.
Absolutely. I think you look at this matchup and you see the Bengals, and from the Broncos fans' perspective, I think you're kind of annoyed that the game that they just played against the Vikings isn't necessarily what's going to be the case on Monday night, right? You're like, oh man, why couldn't they play like that against us, right? That's exactly the type of game the Broncos need right now, is a sort of a get-right game. But I don't think the Bengals are going to just come in and lay flat. We saw the same thing with the Chicago Bears a couple of weeks ago. They allow 50-plus points to the Detroit Lions. They come out and they beat the Cowboys the next week. So week to week in the NFL, you just never know what's going to happen. But the biggest storyline for the Broncos in this game is obviously, can you avoid that tailspin, and can you take care of business against a team that's got its backup quarterback out there? You would think, James, that the Broncos just had a similar, final score in week 3 as what the Bengals did against the Vikings, because Broncos country is absolutely in a frenzy right now over the state of the team, over the fact that there's no consistency on offense, that there's no real flow to the game. The defense has been bend, don't break, but they've been doing a little too much bending. So the biggest storyline is, can you avoid that tailspin going into the month of October? We know that Sean Payton has historically not been great in the month of September, pretty much 500 for the course of his head coaching career. And the Broncos look like they're kind of on par with that. They don't have sort of a bread and butter offensively at this point. Bo Nix has struggled a little bit in his sophomore season. So yeah, you want to avoid that tailspin going into the month of October, where you feel like you've got a number of winnable games ahead of you.
Yeah, I think that's why it's such a big game. One, can you imagine the storylines? You're talking about the story. Can you imagine the storylines if Jake Browning goes there and wins? It's much different than a Joe Burrow doing it, right? And on the Bengals side, there's just so many unknowns right now. Like they cannot and have not been able to run the ball, but they're not a great passing offense right now either. And that was pre Joe Burrow getting injured. They still hadn't really taken flight all the way in full form. And so this offense is obviously considered a strength coming into this season. And I think the Broncos, their defense was considered a major strength coming into this season. And so I think with Jake Browning, that's a big, big task. And honestly, I'm looking at Zach Taylor. I've talked about him a lot this week, and we have on the pod. Can they find ways to jumpstart this offense? Nationally, it was all talk about the defense all offseason, and they're far from perfect. It's not like we're people in Cincinnati are banking on them to go shut down Bo Nix and Sean Payton's offense in Denver, but they've been more steady than this offense. And so that's shocking, even with Jake Browning at quarterback, but that's the reality through 3 games.
And I know it's been an unfortunate kind of theme over Joe Burrow's career. This is the third time you and I were talking off the air. This is the third time he's had a season-ending injury, which absolutely sucks because the NFL is being robbed of one of its best players. Obviously, the Bengals are in a championship window when he's out there on the field. Do you feel like Jake Browning can turn things around and be sort of somebody to steady that ship? Or do you kind of just feel like at this point, hey, Bengals fans, we kind of know what he is, and we're going to have to overcome exactly that?
No, he's capable. He's certainly capable. And I think that's what was so interesting about the matchup last week and their game plan and everything that went into it. Is it was just a snowball effect. And just when they started to figure a few things out, they couldn't hold on to the ball and they fumbled it 3 straight times and the game was over. They were down, they dug themselves in a hole and then 3 straight fumbles and that's it. So it's a really unique scenario to happen. Usually that doesn't happen at the NFL level, but it's a tall task. It is, because you're going on the road, backup quarterback, offensive line has struggled. We'll dive into some of these matchups. And you're going to have to find a way to get to 20 plus points, I think, is a minimum expectation for this offense because of all the firepower and in the weapons and things that I think that Denver is going to deploy on the other side, and that the Bengals are going to have to deal with. And so regardless of what the 1 and 2 Broncos have done to this point, I think the Bengals, like I said, if they don't play their best game, offense and defense, that 7-point spread that's on FanDuel, that might be easy. So they're going to have to play really, really well to have a shot.
Yeah, both of these teams may have a little bit of desperation on their side here going into the Monday night matchup, in the final of a doubleheader on Monday night, which is exciting. But obviously, it's not quite the matchup that we all anticipated, but there's still going to be some marquee matchups, some things to watch in this game. We get a rematch between Riley Moss and T. Higgins, very, very highly discussed after last season's matchup. So we'll break that down, as well as a number of other matchups here in this Monday night football bout between two teams trying to finish strong in September, get into October with a 2-2 record or better for the Bengals case. So we'll talk about that coming up on today's Crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Broncos, Locked On Bengals. Crossover Thursday is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay. Even if you want to jump in live as the action unfolds, you can do exactly that, and you can check out the action on this Broncos-Bengals Monday night game as well, where the Broncos are 7-point home favorites. We'll see how that goes on Monday night. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Crossover Thursday is also brought to you by Wayfair. When you think game day, you might not think Wayfair, but you should, because Wayfair is the best kept secret for incredible and affordable game day finds. Wayfair has everything that you need to get your space ready for the season, whether you're tailgating outdoors or cheering your team from the living room. And what I love about Wayfair is the selection. Wayfair has unique finds and options for every budget, so we can show off our team spirit without overspending, right? And delivery is free, fast, hassle-free. That's exactly what we want. It's a lifesaver when you need something in time for kickoff. And Wayfair is your trusted destination for all things game day, from coolers and grills to recliners and slow cookers. Shop, save, and score today at wayfair.com. That's Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Denver Broncos cornerback Riley Moss has a shot at redemption against T. Higgins after getting kind of his lunch handed to him last season. And we've got some other matchups to look forward to here as the Broncos defensive front and pass rush goes up against a Cincinnati Bengals offensive line that we'll kind of see how they adapt after the first few weeks of the season. But before we get into big time matchups for this Monday Night Football affair between the Broncos and Bengals, want to say thank you once again to every single one of you out there that makes us your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate all you everyday listeners of our respective shows. James, I want to know from you, what's your perspective on this? I know I kind of teased the Riley Moss versus T. Higgins thing. That was such a big storyline going into last year's game between these two teams. And then, of course, Riley did not have a good game. And that was what kind of sparked right now. Broncos country does not have faith in Riley Moss. That was the turning point for them. So I don't know, maybe we start there. Let's get your thoughts on that particular matchup, the rematch between Riley Moss and T. Higgins.
Look, it is tough to repeat what T did in that game. I mean, he was awesome. And it was such a wild, wacky, crazy game. The Bengals are trying to stay in the playoff mix and find a way. And T was unguardable. He used his size and his strength. And he had Joe Burrow putting the ball where only he could get it. And so that's a tough combo when you're Riley Moss in a tough situation to be in. So would I sour on a corner for that game? No. I mean, T. Higgins is a freak. There aren't many like him. And I think that's a matchup the Bengals have to win. And I'm not just talking about T. The Bengals receivers in the juicier matchup for me is Jamar versus Patrick. But the Bengals receivers have to win this matchup with the Broncos secondary. They have to. And on Monday night, when this game ends, if we're saying, oh, well, the Broncos secondary beat the Bengals receivers, well, then I think we know the result of the game. If the Bengals receivers win, well, then that gives the Bengals a chance, because that's where they need to have the edge, especially with Joe Burrow out. They need these weapons and these receivers to step up and be extremely productive. And maybe that is T. Higgins mossing Moss again. That might be it. He may just be that dude. Or maybe it's Jamar and Patrick Surtain going back to their SEC days. And that matchup is always juicy for me, and one that I personally will be paying attention to, just because I think it's number one receiver on the planet versus number one corner on the planet. And so you put your feet up, get some popcorn, and you watch them go to work.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. I mean, those two guys are, like you said, the best at their positions in the NFL, and it is must-see TV, especially when you get hands on the all-22, right? You get to watch that matchup kind of isolated there. So I think that Broncos country definitely needs to hear what you had to say about Riley Moss. I mean, you don't write a guy off after one game against a freak player out there, but Riley does get picked on a lot. That will be a matchup to watch in this game because teams target him. Obviously, you don't necessarily want to throw it at Pat Surtain, although I guess I don't know what if Daniel Jones is drinking Mike's secret stuff, from Space Jam. He was going at Pat Surtain all week too, and Pat really couldn't do much about it. I mean, it was a staggering reality check, I think, for him. So I think he'll have a bit of a chip on his shoulder the rest of the season. But certainly those two matchups, big time. And you referenced it earlier. You teased it. The Bengals offensive line going up against the Denver Broncos pass rush in this game. The Broncos, Nick Bonito has been playing at the highest level that we've seen. I don't like to throw around this hyperbole because of the reverence that I have for the great Von Miller, the best defensive player in the history of the team. But James, Nick Bonito is on par with the best that we've seen from Von. If he would slap the ball out a little more, that's the only caveat there that I would say. And I don't like to go that direction. I don't like to compare guys to Von Miller. I'm not just saying that. I think what we've seen from him, the dominance, I think Joe Alt had not given up a single pressure in the first two games of the season. And then Nick Bonito kind of put some teach tape out there against Joe Alt in week 3. So really, really good stuff from him and special stuff that we haven't seen since Von, for sure, if not on par with Von. So that's going to be a huge matchup to watch in this game, the Broncos pass rush versus the Bengals O-line.
It's the matchup. I love cornerbacks and receivers, and Locked On Bengals listeners know I love receivers. So the Bengals are the right team for me to cover. Speaking of, well, I'll get to a guy that I really liked in the draft that just happens to be on a Denver roster coming up in just a second. But yeah, I mean, that's the matchup. It really, when you look at this Bengals offensive line, it's been the biggest topic of the week, is why this offense hasn't been able to pass protect and or run block. I mean, they're the worst. You look at some metrics, the worst offense in the league to this point, and they need to be able to get the ground game going some, so Nick Bonito can't tee off on Jake Browning. And can they drop back a bunch with Jake Browning in general? They're going to drop back. They're going to have to pass it, but you want to limit that some, especially with that Broncos pass rush. So that balance is huge. The Bengals have stunk when it comes to running the ball. Chase Brown, as good as he was, and you guys saw it last year, he made plays in that Denver game. He was really good last year. Averaged under a foot per carry last week. Not a yard, under a foot. He had 10 carries for 3 yards, 0.3 yards per carry. That's just a hair under a foot per carry. They have to get him going. And whether it's in the passing game, whether it's on the ground, Chase Brown is going to have to be a factor. And if he is, then it will take some pressure off of this offensive front that needs to be able to run block better, not be able to, needs to run block better, and is tasked with blocking a really good front for the Broncos. So, yeah, it did surprise me that you went with the Von Miller comp. Maybe it shouldn't, and maybe it won't after Monday if Nick Bonito goes off, because it wouldn't shock me. And that's what I think is interesting here. Now, let me ask you this about Nick Bonito, and I don't know at this stage. Is he moving all over? Is he going to line up on just one side, or does he just move everywhere?
He does move everywhere. Yeah. Vance Joseph will line him up on both sides and kind of try to get matchups for him. So that's what's really helpful. And they've also started a little bit this season pairing him up sometimes with Jonah Ellis, not just Jonah Cooper. So we're seeing Jonah Ellis out there as well, along with Nick Bonito. And I wouldn't be surprised to see all three of those guys out there on the field. I don't know. The Broncos haven't tried that a ton at this point. I don't know the official count on that, but I wouldn't be surprised to see those three guys out there at the same time at some point. And a huge thing for the Bengals, and this, to your point, James, is going to be exploiting the Broncos' inability to prevent teams from getting huge chunks on first down. That's been a huge problem this season so far, as you want that pass rush to be able to tee off. Well, and if you want to do that, if you want to see the pass rush tee off, you got to stop these teams from gaining 8-9 yards of play on every first down and get them into long down and distance on third. So to your point about the running game for the Bengals, maybe even the quick passing game from Jake Browning, get the ball out of your hands quickly, get as much as you can on first down, and keep the Broncos on their heels defensively in those third and short situations. So that's going to be crucial in this game.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that might be the ball game, is in the trenches. And Amarius Mims is coming off one of his better games at right tackle. Orlando Brown Jr. coming off of one of his worst games at left tackle for the Bengals. In an ideal world, in most worlds, I think that the Bengals are confident in both of those guys, but how they respond going to be huge. Obviously, there's questions at guard and on the interior of the Bengals offensive front. They're going to have their best game, not just of the season, their best game in a while, I think, to keep that pass rush at bay, and then also open up holes in the run game to take pressure off of this passing game that is obviously going to be tested.
There's a lot at stake on Monday night between the Broncos and the Bengals, and we're going to give our final thoughts on this game here coming up on today's crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Broncos, Locked On Bengals. This crossover Thursday episode is also presented by Game Time. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium, surrounded by fans, cheering on your favorite team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It is so frustrating, and that's why I use Game Time. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans, and Game Time is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the Game Time guarantee, where you'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up Game Time, just a couple of taps. I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games as low as $100. You cannot beat that. And my favorite feature of the app is being able to see your exact view from your seat before you buy your tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Winning in the trenches and minimizing mistakes, those are going to be absolutely critical for both the Broncos and the Bengals as they take each other on here Monday Night Football. Broncos country, Bengals fans, once again, just want to say we appreciate you all so much for listening, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. If you haven't done so already, we encourage you, hit subscribe and become part of our communities at Locked On Broncos and Locked On Bengals as well. James, I want to throw it to you here. Your final thoughts maybe for this matchup going in, maybe your gut instinct. Obviously, we talked about winning in the trenches being important. What's your kind of feel for this game and the Bengals win if sort of a thing?
Oh, there's a few things here. The first one is they have to make sure that their offensive line has the best game they've had all year. And so it can't just be, they're really good at protecting Jake Browning, because I think they need to run block at an extremely high level, and they haven't done that to this point. They've been really, really bad at it. So it's all across the board. Open up running lanes for Chase Brown, protect Jake, because if you open up running lanes and you're protecting Jake early, well, that's going to open up some play action. That's going to give you it's going to take pressure off of this backup quarterback on the road Monday night, all of the things that come with that in a not just pressure-filled environment for him, but against a team with their back against the wall in the Denver Broncos. So I expect that defense to be flying around. Number two, their wide receivers, they have to win. They have to have get the better of this Denver Broncos secondary. And it doesn't have to be Jamar Chase versus Patrick Surtain. And that doesn't mean it can't be. Of course it can. And I wouldn't shy away from that. But to me, you have to find a way to get these guys going. Last week, when things really got away, the Vikings were up 34-3 at halftime. So the game's over at the half. With 2 minutes to go in the half, Jamar Chase had 2 catches for 3 yards. T. Higgins had 1 catch for 15 yards. Jamar ended up with 5 for 50. T, that same 1 for 15. That cannot be the case. And if it is, then these other weapons have to have really huge games. And I think that that's unrealistic. So there's that. And then the last thing, contain these weapons for the Broncos, and don't let Bo Nix do what he did towards the end of that game last year, where he was able to, just the moon ball, the deep ball, it worked. And the guy I referred to earlier in the pod, Troy Franklin. I loved him pre-draft. I don't know why the Bengals didn't take him 80th overall. They took Jermaine Burton instead. They should have taken Troy Franklin. It's very clear. Do not let Troy Franklin beat you deep. I think that's a big one.
Yeah, Troy Franklin had a breakout game against the Indianapolis Colts in week 2 and then was kind of non-existent in week 3, which was really surprising to everybody because of it was a very concerted effort to get him the ball. I call them manufactured touches. Some people are like, what the heck does that even mean? Well, what I mean is that they're deliberately trying to get him the ball at the start of the play. It's not like a progression or things like that. I mean, you are going to Troy Franklin, get him the ball quickly, let him do his thing because Sean Payton loves his abilities after the catch. So we'll see if he can bounce back on Monday Night Football after really no involvement against the Chargers. But I think the Broncos win this game if Bo Nix plays up to the level that we've seen he's capable of, especially in these big moments. We've seen him come through at times, but the offensive overall outfit just hasn't been efficient enough for the Denver Broncos. So they really need to take that next step as an offense. And I think minimizing the mistakes, like I teased earlier, James, obviously in the NFL, you want to win the turnover battle. The Broncos won the turnover battle against the Chargers and still couldn't win because they committed 10 penalties. You had way too many missed opportunities offensively. You would love to see this Broncos team play complementary football for once. And I know that it's still an NFL team. You're going up against a backup quarterback. You can't write anybody off. I think the Broncos maybe let a little bit of the noise preseason get to them a little bit. Maybe Sean Payton did a little too much talking, so really just kind of these first 3 games and 2 losses of heartbreaking variety, just absolutely gut-wrenching variety. I mean, that's got to humble you a little bit going into this game. You need to play with a chip on your shoulder going into this primetime matchup. So I think the Broncos win the game if Bo Nix operates the offense efficiently and effectively, and if they minimize the mistakes here against the Bengals.
Yeah, it's totally fair. And I think as a lot of these keys go, you could say the same thing. They need Jake Browning to be efficient, not turn the ball over, which he's done. 5 interceptions now in just over 6 quarters of football. That can't be the case. Those are back-breaking plays, and he's going to be under pressure. And so how do they use their best weapons, which are their receivers and their running back and their offensive skill players, and also avoid the big swing turnover plays? Huge. And then on the flip side, in the Bengals' 2 wins, they won the turnover battle and had 2 interceptions in each of those wins, even though they didn't play great. Goes a long way if you can find a way to intercept Bo Nix once or twice for sure. So I think that's going to be a huge factor in who wins on Monday.
Yeah, it really is. And ultimately, I think you said it best earlier. If the Broncos lose this game, I mean, the narrative is going to be really interesting, not just in terms of the local reaction, but in terms of the national reaction, because again, it's an NFL team. These guys get paid to play. They've still got great players, obviously. But if you, on your home field, get beat by the Bengals backup quarterback when you, like you said, got your backs up against the wall, the pressure's on, must-win situation, I mean, what would be your read on that from the outside perspective of saying, hey, I mean, shoot, like, I know it's one game, it's still early in the regular season, but this would say a lot, I would think, about the way that Sean Payton is kind of leading the team right now.
Yeah, I think it would be, oh my goodness, what's wrong in Denver? And I do think that the Bengals could use that to their advantage a little bit. They should be able to play a little pressure free and be just as motivated as Denver, because they're coming off of the worst loss in franchise history. I mean, 48 to 10, it's literally the worst. They've never lost by 38. And they were down by 45 at one point, which is the largest deficit ever in a game in franchise history. So they have a ton to prove, but the Broncos are the ones I think that have the pressure, because I would expect them to win. And so is that good or bad? A lot of teams usually respond, or the good teams respond well in those situations and come out with their hair on fire. So it could be awful for the Bengals in that scenario. Or maybe it's the other way and the Bengals hang in it early and weather the storm, and then that pressure really starts to set in. I don't know which way it will be, but I do think that that's going to be a factor in Monday's game.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I mean, obviously there's a lot at stake in this game for both of these teams, and certainly, you wish that Joe Burrow was able to play in this game and the rest of the season to make it a more interesting matchup at the very least, but at the same time, we just want to see these two teams end September well, finish September well, and get to October with a little bit of momentum here in the second quarter of the season. But Broncos country, Bengals fans, appreciate you all so much for tuning in here today. And after you listen to Locked On Broncos or Locked On Bengals, make sure you check out Locked On NFL. Do amazing stuff over there every single day. Just slide all these different Locked On shows into your daily algorithm. You'll have plenty of content to digest, but we appreciate you all, and we'll catch you on the next episode.